Morning, everyone. Morning. It's great to see you. This series has been really special, hasn't it? It's been called Everyday Saints, and this congregation is populated by everyday saints. We could have every single person up here sharing stories of God's power and faithfulness in our lives. But this morning, it's a real privilege to be able to interview Robin and Karen Noad, who many of you will know, and some won't, because there's a number of new people here. So if I can call up and welcome Robin and Karen Noad, let's give them a big round of applause. There you go, guys. So I met with Robin and Karen in the week. It was so special to catch up with them.
He endured 3 hours of us talking non-stop.
It was a privilege. I've been so encouraged by you guys. You've always come and embraced me and encouraged me, and I love that. But I haven't actually known a huge amount about your history, so quite a bit of that time was you sharing to me who you guys are. And because there are new people here in this congregation, I wondered if it was possible if you could just share, really super brief, who you are, your backgrounds, your life together, before we launch into what we're going to be exploring together. So go for it.
So I was born just around the corner in Bloomfield Drive. There's not a plaque there yet, but one day maybe. And I'm one of the Noads from Noad's Corner, although I never worked there. My father worked there, and my uncle ran the shop for many years. And I started actually going to church. My mum sent me with a lovely lady called Amy Dainton, who many people who lived on Odd Down will remember. And she took me to Sunday school at the URC church, or congregational church as it was in those days. And I went there for a few years. But then through the church drama group here, I gradually got more and more drawn into the life of St. Philip's. And so from that point onward, I've been a regular member here. Yes, and I was just thinking, for the first 30 years of my life, apart from a couple of years where we lived out at Radstock, a few miles away, 9 months in London doing a post-grad course, my whole life really consisted of living in this area in about an 8-mile radius. So, yeah. But then God moved things.
And I grew up in Oklahoma, and which is even hotter than this, but we have air conditioning there, so I do miss that. I've always loved England ever since I saw Mary Poppins, and my dream from as a little girl was that someday I'd be able to come to England, and God granted the desire of my heart. I lots of story, but I started working with a Christian counseling ministry, and a couple came from England to do the training there, and then I came back with them to help them set up a counseling ministry here in Bath. And so I was just so excited to be able to, come to England and my dream come true to be able to live here. And I started coming to St. Philip's, I think it was 1988, something like that. And then Robin and I met here, obviously, various things happening in the church. And we got to know one another better through the church drama group and singing together. And we eventually were involved in many, many things in the church. We were in the worship group and the drama group and, home groups and various ministries. So we basically spent pretty much every non-working hour up at the church and doing various things, which meant we had really close ties with our church family here and many friends that were part of the church family, that have moved to other places now, but we're still very much in touch with. And that support and those friendships have really meant a lot through the years.
So, we were really, really involved here at the church, and we loved it, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. But we felt just this sort of stirring in our hearts, really, that God may be calling us to something else, but we weren't at all sure what that was. I was at this time working for the Bible Society in Swindon, and on one occasion we had a monthly service for all staff, and one of the leaders of the Northumbria community came and led it, and that made a big impression on me, and I remember going home and sharing that with Karen, and I think at some point we sat down and wrote a list of different things that possibly God was calling us to, and but then forgot all about that list. It so happened that I changed role within the society from being basically a librarian information manager to an events manager working in the arts with Christian artists. And through that, there was an opportunity to go and work actually out of the Northumbria community to take part in some biblical storytelling initiative that was being started there. So we both went, me at that point still employed by Bible Society, and Karen as a part-time person, to work on this storytelling initiative, biblical storytelling.
And Bob Waldron. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and we had a very good friend, Bob and Jane Waldron, who some of you will remember. Bob gave us a picture of a hot air balloon basically being released and being blown wherever the Spirit led us. And again, we weren't sure where or what that meant at that time, but we decided to take this leap of faith and move up to the north of England, leave all our friends and connections here, and see what happens. So.
Yeah. So, sorry, Karen.
No, I was just going to say, but we very much felt like, for whatever reason, that our end path wasn't in Northumbria, that was somehow a stepping stone, and we didn't know what that meant or why, what God was going to do further on, but we just knew to take that step, and so that's what we did, and God used that a lot in various ways.
There was a phrase at that time, let go and let God, and I think that was very much in our hearts at that time. And, we felt like we were leaving, all our wonderful... we had so many friends here that we could really talk to on a really deep spiritual level, and we worried that we might not find that when we left, and we almost immediately found a family, actually, that we felt immediately connected with, and we've stayed friends with them over the years. So that was a real encouragement in the beginning of that.
So you had St. Philip's and the Northumbria community as kind of this family and this nurturing, encouraging community, which you needed for this next step. As you said, it was a stepping stone. God was leading you by His Spirit to something quite in-depth and immersive, and you needed that encouragement from the conversation.
We definitely did.
So share us about this thing that God sent you to. We'd love to hear it.
Okay. Well, while we were in Northumbria, my sister passed away. She was only 40, and she had two children, 14 and 10. And we obviously went back to America for the funeral, and were really concerned when we got back how they were doing. We were just really concerned for their welfare, as my parents were. They shared a lot of concerns that they'd had because their dad wasn't coping. My sister hadn't been coping very well, and their dad wasn't coping very well, and he especially didn't cope very well with the loss of his wife. He had a lot of health issues and various things that prevented him really from looking after them very well, but he didn't recognize any problems or any need for help. So that was difficult because he didn't want us to help in any way, and we weren't really sure what to do. And we kind of shared concerns with social services and their school, and just kind of let them know that we were worried. Could they keep an eye out for them? And then we decided to make a plan to come back about 5 months later, just to kind of check on things and see how they were going. But we came back 5 months later, and they were much worse. And the kids weren't going to school very often, and it just, things were just not very good. And so we ended up talking to social services again and asked them to... we actually made a formal concern with social services, and just said, please, could they keep an eye on things? We talked a lot about what to do, because we could see that their dad was not really interested in any help, and we didn't really know what we could do, and certainly from a distance. But neither of us really. I loved being here. This is my dream, to come back to England. It's Robin's home, and we didn't really want to move to America. So we were, in that sense, we're kind of a different story of Everyday Saints, because we did feel God's calling, but we, as
more like a dragging, as someone said to us.
So we, we just were really struggling with what to do. So we asked God to make it abundantly clear, and a friend of ours prayed for us over the phone just before we flew back to England, and said, God, make it abundantly clear that they will know without a doubt that what you want them to do. So we kind of left in peace and thought, good, we'll just leave that with God. And we got back, and
we got back on a Monday, and the very next day we had a call from social services to say that Dad had been in a very minor road accident with one of the kids in the car and a friend, and they'd been taken into care. Could we come back on Wednesday for the court hearing? And we said, well, no, that wasn't physically possible at that time, but we would be back on Thursday. And so, the community were fantastic. We'd been telling them about the situation and everything, but, looking back on it now, they were very, very gracious to release us from our duties. And we went not knowing if we were going for, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, or whatever. But, we were back on Thursday, and looked for a place to live that would keep the children in their same school districts. And it was complicated, because Karen's mum and dad had been wonderful. They'd had a big part in bringing the children up to that point. And Alyssa, the elder one, was really keen to go and live with her grandparents, but there was a legal reason why that couldn't happen. So that was complicated. And Anthony, being the younger one, didn't really see the problems that his dad, or at least he didn't acknowledge the problems that his dad had. So neither of them were really keen to have this weird aunt and uncle from England come and look after them. We knew them a little bit, but God provided for us in that way, because I had actually been made redundant by Bible Society at the very beginning of 2000, and this was February of 2000, and I had a small redundancy payment. And that actually enabled us to not work for the first 6 months, to get to know the kids, really, because, we'd only met them a few times, like over Thanksgiving or something, for a few days. So they didn't know us at all, and we didn't really know them. Yeah. So that was, again, another little sign of God's faithfulness to us. And
I think we both were... essentially, we've been talking about it since, trying to think things through, and we just found it so hard being in America. We felt like we were swimming upstream all the time. The culture was so different, and it's changed already so much from when I had left, and we just really felt like fish out of water. We didn't fit in, and it was very hard to be there. And to be honest, I really struggled and felt really disappointed with God, because it's like, you've called us to this, we've responded, we've said yes, and then, now we're living with children that resent us and don't want to be with us, and made it very known that, and life at home was really difficult. It was just such a struggle, and, we've never had children. To suddenly have a teenager and a near teen, it was really, really difficult. And we just felt like, almost, not really abandoned by God, but we just felt disappointed, I think, and really struggled to know how to go forward. God kept bringing little things to mind, and that's when we remembered, how we could see in the midst of it all how He had really helped us. One of the things at the Northumbria community, they have, I guess, a sense of liturgy and daily prayers, and talked about the importance of a rhythm of having, praying 3 times a day, and having evening compline. And so for a time, we did the evening compline together because we just, we felt like during the day it was kind of just survival, trying to get through the day. So we just really struggled with having any chance to just sort of worship God and feel connected with Him.
Yeah, ironically, in the middle of the Bible Belt, surrounded by many different churches of all denominations, colours, and we struggled to find any deep relationships, didn't we? People were superficially friendly, but the depth of relationship that we'd experienced both here and in Northumberland, just wasn't happening for us. So
Robin,
we used to... Sorry.
You go for it.
We used to... at the end of the day, we'd collapse in front of the TV and watch Star Trek Voyager. And for a time, we said those were our only friends. It was pathetic, really. But and we can super spiritualize it and say, God was with us all that time. But it didn't feel like that for lots of time. And, that's down to us as well. But that's the reality. We weren't in this great place. But I have to say, again, we moved at a time when Skype had just become available. And so that enabled us to keep in contact with people here and through email. And we sent out regular sort of updates. And people here were wonderful. And our friends in Northumberland praying for us. But we just missed that close contact, that deep sort of heart-to-heart friendships that we had experienced up to that point in our individual and married life. So,
yeah, I was just going to say, because I know you mentioned about Chris White had come over, and there was encouragement from her, and with Skype you had that connection. There was a huge distance, but you still had that loving support kind of coming through, spurring you on. Was that just what you needed at times, just to keep pushing ahead?
Yeah, in fact, even with the Northumbria community, and again, thinking back to technology changes, but there was a monthly online service, and we were able to, even with the time difference, we were able to join in, and that used the Open University chat room or something. This was back in the 2000s. So Zoom, although it's a new incarnation of that, things were around that helped us a little bit on that front, and we were grateful for those.
Yeah, I mean, we came back, we tried to come back at least once a year, and whenever we came back, it was just such refreshment to come back, and so many people, I see Jean smiling there, but Jean Catchpool and Chris and Graham White and Ali and Kevin Mottram and so many, Roger and Jenny Moorish, that we would regularly visit when we would come back, and we'd go and just pour our hearts out, and they'd ask what was happening and ask about the children, and they would always pray with us, and we knew that they were praying for us the time when we were away, and it was just like that support was such a vital lifeline for us, because at that time, and we'll talk about this later, but it's like we couldn't feel, and I think that's important to say, we couldn't feel God very often, but we were constantly reminded that He was with us, and we kept, after a few years of it being really, really hard, things started getting a bit easier. We had some lovely neighbors and blessing, just so many blessings from God that we started getting a better perspective and then being able to see all that He was doing in our lives.
And Karen's parents had remained a real support to us as well when things got really bad, which they did on occasions where we just felt we couldn't cope anymore. They would come and take the kids for a weekend and give us a little break. And also an old friend of Karen's, the one that had prayed for us, she had since married, and their home up in Missouri had become a place of retreat for us. And they had a home group, and we would meet with them, every few months, and they would pray with us too. Yeah. So, but there was still nothing close by. We were in several different churches. There was one that we went to for a short time that did feel more like home, but the pastor moved away and the church changed, and it was nearly an hour's drive away, so that didn't last for too long. But it was another encouragement along the way.
So you guys, remember when we were speaking, there was a point in which your care of the children ceased and you bought a new home. Do you want to just tell us about that? Because it's quite an interesting story.
We'll let you tell that part.
So the social services aim always with a situation like this is to reunite the children with the family, and so we knew that from the beginning. We didn't think it was wise, but we had no option but to go along with it. So at some point we realized that we didn't want to go on living sort of month by month. We needed to make a decision. So we decided that we would, whatever happened with the children, whether they were living with us or not, that we needed to be around as a safety net and a support. So we decided we would buy a house. And again, we were very fortunate. I had a little bit of money that we could draw on. And another friend loaned us a little bit of money to get a deposit together. And we bought a house, except that the house we were originally going to buy fell through at the very last minute. And we'd already given in our notice at the apartment where we'd lived for 18 months. And so we ended up staying with friends. One family, we'd never even met the wife. I only knew it was through a work colleague and contact. But people at that point, they were work colleagues, not people from church, opened their homes to us. And but on the day that we moved out of our apartment, we saw an ad in the paper for a house 1 street south of the house we were going to buy. And we went, it was a Sunday evening, we walked in and we knew immediately this was the home for us. And the complication there was that we could go ahead and buy the house in November, but we couldn't move in until the following February because they were having a house built. So we basically bought the house and they rented it from us for that time. And we came over here for a month at Christmas, I think, and went back in January. And we moved in the first weekend in February. The kids by this time had been sent back to their dad, and we were, doing our best to sort of keep an eye on things. So we moved in on the Friday or Saturday and had a whole weekend. And on the Monday morning, we were at work, and Karen called me and said, social services have called, and they want the kids to come back to us. So after being homeless for 4 months, we had a whole weekend on our own, and the kids were back with us that evening. So we were hysterical with laughter. God's timing.
Yeah, so we recognized, God's hand again. That, if they'd called even the week before, we wouldn't have had a home for them. But I did want to share just a couple of verses that God, I think just recognizing how much God had been speaking to us in various ways, like you said, and seeing what his hand was doing as we kind of came out of the desert place a little bit and began to recognize him. But one of the verses that kept me going the whole time, I wanted to share with all the parents out there, Isaiah 1, verse 2. And it says, "For the Lord has spoken, I reared children and brought them up, but they have rebelled against me." And, I kept thinking, if God, who's perfect and a perfect father, has rebellious children, then it just took the pressure off of me because I kept feeling so much a failure. We just felt like, it was just constantly feeling like our time there, that we were just failing and struggling. And I wished I was more in tune with God. I wished I was a better parent. All of these things. And God just kept encouraging me with this. And he also encouraged me with Psalm 27:13. This was my mantra many times. It's like, I will remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. So often I kept thinking, oh, God, just take us home, But he just kept saying, no, hang in there. And he just did so many things. It was
and we learned so much. All you parents will agree. You learn so much through the kids and even their rebelliousness and everything, and you suddenly reflect, oh, that's just like me with God. He really wants the best for us. But certainly Anthony couldn't see that. We were in constant conflict with him over many years. And, he just couldn't see that all we were trying to do, say, and guide him was because we loved him and we wanted the best for him.
Yeah.
And that he just couldn't see that, or at least wouldn't acknowledge it. So
But you were saying to me, you have a really beautiful relationship now.
yeah, so that's been wonderful. You know, he went through a time of abusing drugs. He nearly died on a couple of occasions. A couple of miraculous things that kept him alive. And through amazing work contacts, we were able to get legal help that we needed. We got to know more about the US legal system than we ever wanted to know. But he's come through that. He'd gone through so many jobs, you know, every other week was a new job. And but now he's in regular work. He has a little girl, and he's a wonderful full-time dad. So we're really proud of him.
Yeah. Guys, just because of time, it'd be so great to hear more from you. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there, but just thank you so much for sharing this amazing story. I remember you said to me you were so thankful that God didn't say to you, you're going out for 20 years.
Yes.
He just
I
said,
would have
just
said
go.
no. But yeah, he was so faithful. And I mean, one of the things we have been thinking about is what have we learned through this time. And I do want to say the thing I think most importantly for me was just a reminder that we walk by faith and not by feelings. And that the encouragement from God that although, I mean, he knew our hearts and he knew we were struggling, but he also knew, Mike said something last week when Lisa was talking that just so encouraged me, that it's not just about choosing to worship him, choosing to face him, it's also choosing not to turn away. And I think we kept putting ourselves in places with Christians, we kept listening to things, we kept doing what we could do. It took us a long time to feel God's presence again, but we began to see, you know, he showed us how faithful he was and that he was there all the time. He never gave up on us, and he never gave up on the children, and we're just so grateful, so grateful.
And just to say that we did finally find those relationships, especially in a family, and another lady that are very, very dear to us and will be for the rest of our lives. So, God is faithful.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. And let's give him a massive round of applause. Thank you. That was amazing. Hey, an incredible story. Feel free to chat with them more. It's just wonderful. There's so many things that could be drawn out from their life and from Robin and Karen's story. But for me, one observation was of following Jesus amid really challenging circumstances. That was their life of following Jesus into, this is where God was sending them. And it was tough. And God was sending them to be encouragers, to love and to good deeds, to their family in real deep darkness and pain. That's what God was sending them to do, without a time frame. But they needed spurring on. They needed encouragement because, unbeknownst to them, it was going to be tough. They needed spurring on and encouraging. And they received that from the Northumbria community, and they received that from you. And their story, I believe, really helps us understand that one of the ways that we flourish as God's people and we fulfill God's call over our lives is through encouragement. We need to just keep going. We need to be spurred on because it's so hard. That's what we need. And our passage speaks on this so well, and it should come up on the screen. It's Hebrews 10, 24 to 25. And it says, "Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up on meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." That's a great passage, isn't it? Now, just a little bit of a background, just for a moment. Those who originally heard those words were facing their own challenges, but it was very, very difficult, really to the point of death, in fact, because they were facing persecution. Now, this first century Jewish Christians, they were questioning whether to give up their faith, to just pack it in, because it was too hard. Now, why was it too hard? because there'd been this law that had been established by the Roman Empire which said, if you practice Judaism, which is an official religion, you're okay. But if you're a new sect, like you're practicing Christianity, that's disallowed, and you'll be punished. So these Jewish Christians are thinking, we could just sneak back to our old expression of faith and we'll be fine. We could just live in safety. And in fact, that's what some did. So a Sunday morning rocks up. Imagine getting all the seats ready, getting the band going, and basically all the back section of the church, there's no people there. And week on week, no one's turning up. It's like, where's this mass exodus gone? A whole portion of the church had left and gone back to their old Jewish faith. They'd rejected Jesus because, well, maybe he's not that important. And they'd gone back to practicing their Judaism faith, practicing the Old Testament law. So that's the background of why there was these gaps in the church's meeting. Now, the writer of Hebrews says, no, don't do that. Don't do that. That's a really, really bad idea. So he spends about 13, 14 chapters arguing Jesus is better than anything in creation, so don't go back to that. Jesus is better. That's what you'd sum up Hebrews as. Jesus is better. And he says, the author of Hebrews says, I want to encourage you to stand firm. It's certainly by looking at the amazingness of Jesus, but it's also, you can help each other out. You can encourage each other to stand firm in challenging times. And the author of Hebrews says, by being a community who give and receive encouragement, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Years ago, as a youth leader, I was thinking, I wonder if we could be really practical and actually, in our youth gatherings, actually create a way. Let us consider how we could do that. So we came up with this practice called Call Out the Gold. It was for 5 minutes in a youth service. And it became fun. We actually even put some music on in the background. And we said, okay, someone start up, someone jump up, turn to a friend or a neighbor in the youth group and say, you're amazing because of this. Real short bursts of encouragement. And then as a group, we'd all cheer and celebrate. Now, the person who'd then been told that they were amazing for this or that would then stand up themselves and they'd turn to someone else and say, well, you're amazing because of this. And then we'd celebrate. And it would be this viral effect of encouragement. And it was just so encouraging. So uplifting. I wondered if we could do it here for about 2 minutes and see what the effect is. You willing? Anyone willing to start? Just jump up, turn around and go, you, I love you because of this. And then the person who's been encouraged, you stand up and do the same. Anyone willing to do it? No? Who's going to start? Who's going to call out the gold? Calling out the gold is calling out the beauty, the goodness. Yeah.
Alex Eldridge, you have a heart the size of a whale. I love you for that.
Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, Alex, go for it.
J. Monroe, you hear from God and you speak his truth.
Yes, brilliant. So that's calling out the gold. Now, it doesn't need to be a specific practice in our church Sunday, although it could become part of the piece, couldn't it? We could turn around and say, you are so great. But calling out the gold could actually become this seamless, organic, natural part of our community. That's what it's meant to be about the church. Let us consider ways we may spur one another on. But to be that kind of community, it means that during tough times, we actually have to lean into relationship, draw close to one another rather than step away. And the temptation for the audience for Hebrews was actually, this is too tough, I'm going to move away. And I've got memory of a friend of mine who I really love and respect, and they said, I was really surprised at this, they were going through a really tough time, and they said to their friends, I can't be with you, I can't befriend you, be your friend, be with you, until I'm out the other side of the circumstance. And I thought to myself, I don't know if that's the best decision, really. Because without one another, you can't experience encouragement in isolation. You have to be close to one another. It's being close to one another. You receive a hug, you shed tears, you laugh, you receive words of advice or challenge. And the thing I'm struck with Robin and Karen is that even though there was this big distance, Bath, Northumbria, America, there was still a willingness to lean into relationship. And you did that as well. And 20 years later from that experience, they're back here. Those relationships were maintained. You both leaned into relationship and encouraged one another. You called out the gold and spurred them on in challenging times. So to flourish as God's people and fulfill God's call over our lives, we've got to lean into connection to one another. Don't push away. Don't hide away. And let's call out the gold. Amen.